Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, my name is Jawad Majid Khan. I'm Group Head, Iman Islamic Banking, Silk Bank. It's been almost 5 years that I'm associated with Silk Bank. Prior to that, I was heading Dubai Islamic Bank in Pakistan for about 6 years. And it has been almost 13 and a half years that I am in Islamic banking industry in Pakistan. So one of the pioneers, I have the distinction of being one of the pioneers of Islamic banking in Pakistan. The question of the major differences between Islamic and a conventional bank from a consumer or a customer's perspective. Well, this is a very pertinent and a very relevant question which is being asked right from the word go of Islamic banking industry, which was somewhere in 2002 and 2003. But it still remains relevant. So, being a practitioner, being in the industry, one of the pioneers, in my opinion, there are three main differences that an Islamic bank or an Islamic financial institution has vis-a-vis a conventional bank or a normal financial institution. Number one is that for every Islamic banking transaction, there has to be an underlying asset. It cannot be without a physical underlying asset transaction, whether it being traded, whether being transferred from one side to other, whether getting into the equity side, whether into the leasing. So, there has to be an underlying physical asset. Second, here, because mostly you are into a partnership mode with a customer. So, the second part which differentiates an Islamic bank is that Islamic bank in itself is a risk taker. For a conventional bank or for a straight conventional banking transaction, what you do is that the bank is lending money, but it covers its risks, and the risks are almost 100% on the customer. Whereas for all the Islamic banking transactions, the category changes, but the bank as a partner is sharing the risk, which is very important. And taking it from the same point, the third differentiating factor is that every Islamic banking transaction is different, and for that you need to get into a specific agreement to execute that transaction. So it is unlike a conventional bank where you go, you take a loan, you sign those bundle of documents where you don't know what is written there. Here it is like a business transaction whereby you say that this is what I want to do with an Islamic bank. Let's streamline and let's jot down the numbers, terms and conditions, what are the rights and obligations, like any business. So this is the third major difference. So when you have a different contract, you have a different transaction every time for a particular deal that a customer has with the bank. So what this ensures is that it lays down the rights and obligation, and it also mitigates that neither of the parties is exploited. So the third difference, to be specific, is that Islamic banking ensures that there is no exploitation either towards the bank or the customer. This ironically, I would say this is the most important topic and the most important area that one needs to address. As we speak, after putting in a decade of Islamic banking in Pakistan, starting from the infancy stage, and now we are reaching towards not the takeoff but the maturity level, we are still about 12 to 13% of the entire banking industry, which is ironic. While the population is almost 97 to 98% Islamic in Pakistan, how come these clients or this population is not doing Islamic banking? So, one of the reasons, in my own opinion, is that back in 2007 and 8, while I was working with Dubai Islamic Bank, we conducted a very interesting survey of the banking customers that, given an option, how do they perceive Islamic banking? So the results were very interesting. The number one result was that there is a niche of 10% customers who would go Islamic come what may. So if the bank or the financial institution says that we are Islamic, there is a Sharia board sitting on it, they would go for Islamic. Then there is a 10% bankable population which says that there is nothing as Islamic. The conventional banking system and the Islamic banking, they are both the same. So, the typical saying कि कान इधर से पकड़े या कान इधर से पकड़े, it's the same thing. 80% of the banking customer, they are indifferent. They say that we would go Islamic, subject to the Islamic banks are competitive on two things. Number one, that they are competitive on rates, and the other is they are competitive on service. So we will leave the conventional banking or the Sudi system, subject to Islamic banks are providing us the same rates and services. So this is the key, area where all the Islamic financial institutions and the regulators and the government need to sit back and see that what's going wrong. If 80% is the target market, we have only been able to convert 12 to 13%. What are the reasons? In my opinion, again, there are two reasons. One, it pertains to the, if you look at the socio norms or the socio-economic factors prevailing in Pakistan, this is our culture. We generally take things very casually. We see things from our own perspectives. We have our own angles to evaluate things. So there are certain things in this society which don't really, matter to us. But ethically speaking, and in a welfare state, and if we look at the developed countries, whether Islamic or the Western world, like basic human rights, they are very important to them. You can't just, cross limits on certain things. There are certain thresholds that you cannot cross. So although Quran says, Sharia says that, God is openly declaring, and the ayat says that anyone who is dealing in sood or in usury, God and the Prophet declare war against them, whatever the definition may be. But generally, this is not a big deal. People don't take it so, in the letter and spirit. Second is, yes, we as Islamic banks are also responsible, the State Bank of Pakistan and the government. I don't see that conviction. Yes, there will be a lot of stuff going on the media, and there will be a lot of seminars and a lot of talk shows, a lot of circulars happening here and there. But being in the industry for almost 13 years, it has to be much more than this. For example, why can't government or the State Bank of Pakistan make it mandatory for all the banks to convert almost their 75 to 80% of their portfolios to Islamic? This is possible. This can be done in a couple of years. That will substantially increase the share. Why I'm saying that it would not be just the policy or just to show commitment, it also makes a lot of commercial sense. If you see the global numbers, the Islamic banking industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Year-to-year growth for the last 1 decade is almost 30% to 32%. So, I personally think that the two major factors are the general socio-economic fabric that we have as a society, and second is the conviction part on the regulators. One more thing that I think where there has been a failure on the part of the industry, that the general awareness of interest-free banking or Islamic banking, it has not really trickled down to the masses level. So I think a lot needs to be done on that side. There needs to be a specific and very well structured awareness programs. There could be some more seminars or some more subjects being taught on the Islamic finance, because now it's an international phenomenon. So even today, after almost a decade of Islamic banking industry, there is still a scarcity of Islamic banking human resource, not only in Pakistan, not only in the region, but globally. There is a lot of interest in West and USA to explore Islamic finance as an alternate to the prevailing financial system. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I think one needs to do a lot on the awareness side also. When we compare the global share or the growth trends of Islamic financial sector vis-a-vis Pakistan, globally it's growing at a faster pace. One needs to slightly look at the background. Globally, after the recession, which was there almost 6 years back, which was the subprime mortgage recession, there is a global realization that one needs to look at an alternate financial system to replace the prevailing. So that recession, there were a few conclusions which were drawn out by the global economic gurus. And one was that when they saw the Islamic financial institutions, they were the survivors of that recession. And there was one reason. Because all those areas which usually usury or sood prohibits were the main virtues on which Islamic banks thrived. Number one, all the Islamic banks or the financial institutions, they had underlying physical assets. They couldn't go into speculations. They couldn't go into futures. They couldn't go into derivatives. So the valuation of those Islamic banks couldn't be more than 15 to 20% of the actual value. Whereas the conventional banks, the financial institutions, the insurance companies, and their assets, their physical assets, were far less than their market capitalized values. So when there were defaults in a series and they found out the reality of their balance sheet, there were major defaults and bailouts. So generally, the global economists or the financial gurus or their governments, they don't want another recession of that sort. So they are exploring the Islamic banking avenues, how to diversify them further. Secondly, if you talk about major infrastructure projects, if you talk about structured finance, venture capital, Islamic banking products have an edge on the conventional banks because they get into physical transactions, they get into the physical contracts. So if you talk about any 10-year mega project, you talk about a dam, you talk about a gas field, you talk about an energy project, you talk about oil and gas, ports and shipping. There are a lot of examples where Islamic financial institutions and Islamic banking products have done very well. You must have heard about the Islamic banking bond, which is the Sukuk. So you start with Qatar Gas to Putrajaya, Malaysia City, to the development in the Middle East on the real estate side. Even in Pakistan, you talk about the Pakistan Motorway Sukuk, the Civil Aviation Sukuk. So these instruments are far more sophisticated than the conventional banking instruments. They have better yields, they are more secure, and they are far more realistic. So, these are the key areas of strength over the years that Islamic financial institutions or the Islamic banking industry has. Or if we compare it with the conventional system, I think these areas have a lot of potential. Similarly, on the consumer banking products, if you talk about the mortgages, if you talk about the auto financing, again, globally, these products or these avenues are far better than the conventional banking alternates. So in West, there is far more appetite for these. They have excess liquidities, their markets are developed. So they are really, concentrating and really exploring these avenues. Vis-a-vis Pakistan, whereby again, I would come back to the earlier part of the discussion that it has to be slightly out of the box. If we do what we are doing for the last 1 decade, it's like the same. So we need to readdress and get into the next phase. In the end, I would say that we need to take some more concrete steps. We need to do a lot on the public awareness. We need to do a few things on the product innovation. We as the practitioners or the executors or the bankers or the financial institutions need to do more. Maybe we need to sit with the State Bank. We need to sit with the government of Pakistan and make this a more practical and more innovative and definitely more progressive industry in the near future. I would love that this understanding prevails. And again, I would reiterate that this makes a lot of commercial sense. So if we do it right, I personally think that this 12% to 25% can be achieved in the next 3 to 5 years rather than waiting for 2025. And if the policymakers or the government, they decide that they really want to do it and they make it mandatory for the big banks to convert at least 50% of their balance sheets on the Islamic side, I think then even 50% of the market share is very much achievable by 2020.